The scripture reading this morning is Genesis 24, 1 through 9, and 24, 49 through 67. Please stand for the reading of God's word out of reverence for the Lord and his word. Genesis 24, verses 1 through 9, and 49 through 67. Now Abraham was old, well advanced in years, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. And Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he had, "Put your hand under my thigh, that I may make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I dwell, but will go to my country and to my kindred, and take a wife for my son Isaac." The servant said to him, "Perhaps the woman may not be willing to follow me to this land. Must I then take your son back to the land from which you came?" Abraham said to him, "See to it that you do not take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my kindred, and who spoke to me and swore to me, 'To your offspring I will give this land,' he will send his angel before you, and you shall take a wife for my son from there. But if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from this oath of mine. Only you must not take my son back there." So the servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham his master, and swore to him concerning this matter. "Now then, if you are going to show steadfast love and faithfulness to my master, tell me, and if not, tell me, that I may turn to the right hand or to the left." Then Laban and Bethuel answered and said, "The thing has come from the Lord. We cannot speak to you bad or good. Behold, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go, and let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken." When Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed himself to the earth before the Lord. And the servant brought out jewelry of silver and of gold, and garments, and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave to her brother and to her mother costly ornaments. And he and the men who were with him ate and drank, and they spent the night there. When they arose in the morning, he said, "Send me away to your master." Her brother and her mother said, "Let the young woman remain with us a while, at least 10 days. After that she may go." But he said to them, "Do not delay me, since the Lord has prospered my way. Send me away, that I may go to my master." And they said, "Let us call the young woman and ask her." And they called Rebekah and said to her, "Will you go with this man?" She said, "I will go." And they sent away Rebekah, their sister, and her nurse, and Abraham's servant and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, "Our sister, may you become thousands of 10,000s, and may your offspring possess the gate of those who hate him." Then Rebekah and her young women arose and rode on the camels and followed the man. Thus the servant took Rebekah and went his way. Now Isaac had returned from Beer-lahai-roi and was dwelling in the Negeb. And Isaac went out to meditate in the field toward evening. And he lifted up his eyes and saw, and behold, there were camels coming. And Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from the camel and said to the servant, "Who is this man walking in the field to meet us?" The servant said, "It is my master." So she took her veil and covered herself. And the servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Then Isaac brought her into the tent of Sarah his mother, and took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. This is God's word. It is true, and it is given out of his love. Thanks be to God. You may be seated.
Good morning. Okay, who was at the game last night? Isn't it comforting to know that God had predestined the outcome before the foundations of the world, and to rest in that? For either side, you can take this for what it is, but the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. God takes the weak things of this world to confound the wise and strong. I watched the first part of the game, and then I had to go to bed early because I have to do some stuff this morning. And yet our bedroom is right above the TV room. I don't know why we planned it that way. So I heard the rest of the game, even though I was texting saying, I need to go to bed now. And cared they did not. I love you. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this word that reminds us of the ultimate purpose for marriage and your good purposes to sovereignly guide history so that all your perfect, good, and loving will is accomplished. Remind us in this room who need to believe that today for something. Maybe there are some waiting on a future spouse. May they have their perspective regirded this morning, and at the end of the day, show us Jesus. Show us your Son. It's in his name we pray. Amen. One of the best ways to know a married couple, and maybe this is something that you will do in your life groups this week, is to ask them, hey, how did you meet each other? Parents, eventually your child may ask, how did you meet mom? How did you meet dad? I remember when I first met Rebekah, I was just minding my business in the dining hall at college, and the shadow overcast me, and I look up, and she was there, and she said, excuse me, do you have a GPS? And I said, no, why? She said, I'm trying to find directions to your heart. No, that's a joke. She actually asked if I was a Calvinist, and I said, do I really have a choice? And then she said, I just think we're predestined to be together. That is also a joke. First service was wondering if I would tell those with her present, and I did. Literally, her first words to me were, excuse me, your chair is on my backpack strap. But guys, it worked out, okay? More about that later. One of the things that reminds me of God's favor and his good sovereignty is how my parents met. My dad grew up in a village in South India. My mom grew up in Amarillo, Texas, from a well-to-do oil family. And my dad, ironically grows up in a Christian home that traces its Christianity back to the Apostle Thomas. And my mom grew up in a non-Christian home and came to faith in nursing school. So they meet at this Southern Baptist Seminary in Mill Valley, California, called Golden Gate Baptist Theological Seminary. My mom said she was in the dining hall, and my mom, being the only student on campus that had a brand new Mercedes-Benz that her dad bought her, and my dad, who had a net worth of $7, walks in the dining hall, and she had her lift her eyes moment. And who is that? A little bit later, there was a prayer meeting to be held in San Francisco, a prayer meeting for missions. So my mom volunteered to drive a bunch of international students into the city, and my dad is the only one that showed up. 6 months later, they were married. Think about that. This man from South India in a village, my mom, Texas, God brought them together. Two worlds, two stories, one purpose. This is a story about that unconditional promise, God's favoring providence, and God's purpose for marriage. Now, we're actually going to look at both chapters 23 and 24 for the sake of speed, but also because they actually do go together. If you look at the beginning of chapter 23, Sarah passes away, and so she has to be replaced. There needs to be a new woman of the home, and there needs to be someone that will carry on the promise, which means having children. So look at the very end of chapter 24. The narrator goes out of his way to say there's a replacement for Sarah, and it is Rebekah. And she is now the mother, and she is the matriarch of the home. I'm just going to summarize chapter 24. Henry Cloud has a book called Necessary Endings, which I was blessed by, and he says that while we hate the ending of something, a job or a phase of life or a relationship, it also harkens a new beginning, a resurrection, if you will. So we're coming to an end. Sarah passes away. In chapter 25, Abraham will pass away. And there's a sadness to that, but there's also a grace of a new beginning, a new generation. I also wonder if God is being merciful to Sarah, because I have heard one of the hardest things for a mom of a son to do is what's called cutting the apron strings. And my poor Rebekah, and this could get confusing. I'll try and make it clear which Rebekah we were talking about. My poor Rebekah, in theory, may have to do this 3 times over. And so this woman who had waited 25 years for this child passes away before she has to face that moment. And so Abraham wants to buy a place to bury her, and it's called the Cave of Machpelah. And the narrator goes out of his way to say this is in Canaanite territory. And what's going on is God is being faithful to his promise, and he's providing land, permanent land, owned land in that region. And it's happening through this burial plot. So Abraham goes to this guy named Ephron, and he's a Hittite. And at the city gate, in front of everybody witnessing this, they have this bargaining session where he says, I'd like to buy this cave. And Ephron's like, oh, don't worry about it. We love you. Take it. Of course, this is just a game. And if you're from a traditional culture, you know this game called bargaining. And so Ephron's like, no, seriously. And Abraham's like, no, seriously, I will pay for it. So Ephron's like, oh, what's 400 shekels among us, which is a ton of money. And Ephron starts real high, thinking that Abraham will whittle him down. But Abraham's like, no, I'll pay it. He's like, what? And what God is doing through Abraham is saying, I am going to graciously provide this land. No one is going to be able to blame you for stealing it. So he pays this huge sum of money, and he buys the cave and a bunch of land around it. And as the story progresses, several of the patriarchs will say, please make sure you gather my bones together and take it back to that cave, which is a little down payment of a resurrection, because none of those folks got to see the land of promise. But they wanted to be in the place so that they could rise again and see God's fulfilled promise. Please don't believe it when people say there's no doctrine of the resurrection in the Old Testament. You better believe there is. It's not always stated in a sentence, and thus concludes the doctrine of the resurrection. But you have these moments showing that those saints believed in a day to come when they would see the promises of God. And if I was just preaching chapter 23, I would land the plane this way. One day another tomb would be filled so that Machpelah would be empty. John 20, verse 11. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb, and as she wept, she stooped to look into the tomb. And she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus was laying, one at his head and one at the feet. And they said to her, woman, why are you weeping? She said to them, they have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him. So she goes outside, and she's still weeping. And a guy says, hey, what are you looking for? And she's like, my Lord. And he says, Mary. And with her name, she recognizes him. Now, something that hit me this week that has never hit me is John's description of the angels, one at his head, one at his feet, over the burial cloth. What does that remind you of two angels facing each other, perhaps with their wings touching? It's the Ark of the Covenant. I think John is saying that Jesus is the holiness of God. And he has risen from the dead to bring his holy glory to the ends of the earth as the church proclaims the gospel. Okay, so that's chapter 23. Now to chapter 24. I said that this is a story of promise, of providence, and purpose. So here we go, verses 1 through 9, God's unconditional promise. And that is what Moses wants you to know throughout chapter 24, is this is a story of blessing. Verse 1, the Lord blessed Abraham in all things. And then you keep going. He was granted success, prospered, prospering, greatly blessed. Verses 12, 21, 34, 40, 42, 56. But then there's this other phrase. It's really important. It's really important to Israel because they are reading this. Like years later, they are reading the story back. And there's this phrase, steadfast love and faithfulness. It's used in verse 12, 14, 27, and 49. And an epic moment in their history in Exodus. Chapter 34, Moses is asked to be put down into the cleft of a rock, and he wants to see God pass over him. And God says, you can't because you will just disintegrate, but you can see my backside. So God puts him in the cleft, and he passes over him. Moses sees his backside, but really it's about listening, and he hears something, and God proclaims his own character. And he says, I am the God of steadfast love and faithfulness. This is a story of God keeping to his promises. And Israel has to hear that because they're in exile later. And we have to hear that because we're kind of in exile now. So Abraham says, in order for this promise to be fulfilled, we've got to find a wife for Isaac. So he calls his servant, and he's in the most awkward covenant ceremony ever. I'll be delicate here. They lift each other's loins and they clasp not the thigh, something a little higher than the thigh, because it is a I swear on my mother's grave moment. It's the placing near procreation territory, saying you've really got to do this. I need you to go, and you can't go to the Canaanites. You got to go within the family line, and you got to find a wife for Isaac. And the servant is like, okay, so hold on. You want me to go like 500 miles and ask some random young woman to just trust me and come with me? Like, who does that? And Abraham, verses 6 and 7, says, look, I know, because God asked me to do that at one point. He asked me to leave my home, everything I knew, follow him and trust him. And you know what? God kept his promises all the way through thick and thin, through disaster, through people that wanted to kill me and take my wife. He provided this miracle child. God's going to do it. So they clasp each other, verse 9, and off the servant goes. So that's God's unconditional promise. And it's going to lead to his favoring providence, 10 to 61. And I will summarize most of this middle section. But we begin with the journey. Verse 10, the servant took 10 of his master's camels and departed, taking all sorts of choice gifts from his master. And we don't make a big deal of this, but this was like assorting 10 Land Rover Defenders and 2 Bronco Chase vehicles. And you have that Michael Bay cool music, and there's entourage in the desert, tight formation, sand blowing out from the side of these cars, dun, 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 you know, and heading off 500 miles to this place. And all of this, by the way, though the plan of God is also the prudence of man. He's going to a place where he knows he has a high likelihood of finding a young woman. Again, we'll talk about this a little later, but young people in this room, be wise about where you go. Go to places like the local church, first to worship Jesus. It's not a meat market, but a local church is just a prudent place to hang out, like in the college group, to find a young, godly person. Okay, and so they go to a well, 10 to 14, in the evening. And I'm going to say that this is a description, not a prescription, because there's a little bit of this test here. And what the servant is doing is he's looking for an open door or a closed door. And we talked about that with the God's Will sermon a couple months ago, that you've got desire, you've got ability, but you've got to look for opportunities. So he's going to where he knows there are doors. He doesn't know if they're open or closed. So he goes to the well, and he's also prayerful. Look at verse 12. And he said, Lord, God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show steadfast love to my master Abraham. So God, I'm asking you to be faithful. Please make this clear. So if a young woman comes out and she gives us something to drink, that's great, but that's kind of just custom. But if she goes the extra mile, and she says, let me water your camels, then I will know that she is from you. So this is a really good example of discernment. Like, there are certain things that God must provide, but you do your best on your side of things to test the door. Maybe you're trying to find a local church. So you've got to go visit churches, and probably ones that people recommend. Is the Word of God faithfully preached? Is there godly, growing leaders? Is it a place my family can thrive? Does it make much of Jesus? Or you're looking for a job. You're looking based on what you're trained in, but you're also asking biblical questions. Is it in a place that has good churches? Is it a strategic location? Might we be near family? Can I handle this type of job? And one of the biggest, I think, tests is a job that pays a lot of money. Can you handle that? Right? So you're asking those questions. Maybe some of you are, in fact, hoping for and looking for a spouse. And trust me, we will get to that in just a second. So there's this test of God's providence in 10 to 14. And then we have an open door of God's providence, 15 to 21. So the servant sets the stage as best as he can, but he can't produce the end result. God can. So Rebekah shows up. It says 3 things about her. She's attractive. She seems to be of sound character. In fact, the narrator tells us that she has not been with a man. She is a virgin. She is of godly character. She comes from the family line that we're going to find out, right? The daughter of Bethuel. We saw that at the end of chapter 22 with the narrator saying, hint, hint. Something's about to happen with this Rebekah. And she is a servant because we find out she's going to fulfill the test, right? So she comes out and she offers to give water to the servant and the other people. And then there's this waiting. Is she going to do it? Is she going to do it? Verse 19. And then suddenly she's like, hey, while I'm out here, let me water your camels. And you can just feel everybody go, oh, phew, she's the one. She's the one. And so we have an open door of God's providence. Now they take the door, 22 to 51. An open door opens, but there are further tests down the line. There's going to be questions. God must confirm that this is his will, and that happens with our life. A big door will open, we go through it, and then there's these little doors, and you're like, well, I don't like the fact that I have to wait on all these things, but God is confirming. Trust me, you will thank him at the end of the day when he has confirmed his will repeatedly. So the servant gives all this gold to Rebekah, tells them the plan. They have to go to her family. They share the plan with the family. And in fact, her brother and her father are listening to this, and they can't help but notice God is in this. So look at verse 50. Then Laban and Bethuel answered and said, the thing has come from the Lord. We cannot speak to you good or bad. It doesn't matter what I think. God is clearly in this. So we've got to get behind this. So behold, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go. Let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken. And so when it's God's plan, his providence will keep opening those smaller doors. God will never lead you through the big door and then suddenly make it stop on the other end. He may take a left turn and a right turn and send wrinkles in the story, but he will keep opening the doors, funneling you to his plan. And yet, sometimes there are bumps. Sometimes there are bumps. We don't like them, 52 to 61. Don't assume the plan of God has no flat tires or no pauses. So Rebekah's mother and brother come in and they're like, okay, let's think this through. They live 500 miles away and we're about to lose Rebekah. So they're like, oh, hold on here. Why don't you stay with us 10 days? And if you know how the story unfolds, this is foreshadowing to another moment where another Laban would say to Jacob, hold on, why don't you just stay here for a while? And it ends up being 7 years. So always be skeptical of a future father-in-law telling you to wait, okay? So your father-in-laws are like, no. Okay, anyway. So they say, let's do this. What does Rebekah really want? Does she really want to go with you? And now there's like this, what's going to happen? And so the servant is like, no, come on. The Lord is in this. Send me on my way. But fine. Call her. In verse 58, we find out the answer. They called Rebekah and said to her, will you go with this man? She said, I will go. And I think she's working from a heart of faith, that she sees God in this. She sees the steadfast love and the faithfulness of the Lord. And she's going to trust God, even though she hasn't even laid eyes on Isaac yet. So we've got God's providence, we've got trust in God, we've got obedient Rebekah, and God is confirming his plan. All the pieces line up, and then even the family of Rebekah have this Bollywood moment, song and dance number in verse 60. They blessed Rebekah and said to her, our sister, may you become thousands of 10,000s, and may your offspring possess the gates of those who hate him. This is the language of the covenant, and they recognize Rebekah is being invited into the story of God. She's going to be a character in this place. So they're like, do it, Lord. Bless her. May she be a part of this covenant plan. So they load up the defenders and the Broncos, and off they go back home in verse 61. And now, after looking at the promise of God and the providence of God, we look at the high point of our passage, 62 to 67, the purpose God has for marriage. And I can't help myself. I co-wrote a book on dating and marriage, so we're going to talk about it now because the text wants us to talk about it. Don't blame me. So some of you are thinking about a future with marriage, and maybe some of you need to be reminded about your current marriage and what God has for it, what the purpose is for it. Some of you are mourning the loss of a marriage. And so I'm praying the Lord prepares you, deepens you, and gives you proper longing perspective on your marriage. So, for those of you looking for your Rebekah, God gives us some principles in this passage, or your Bubba, okay? So first of all, from this passage, it is all about surrender to the plan of God. Throughout this story, Abraham and the servant, Rebekah's family, and even the camels are surrendered to God. This is not just about an arbitrary desire for a wife or the traditions of the day to find a wife or a desire for sexual pleasure. This is about God being faithful to his promise and providing a wife for that promise. All the characters are surrendered to God's plan, and that is the backdrop of a healthy pursuit of a wife or a husband. You want someone who is in league with God. That's what you're looking for. Someone that's like, this is it. My life is designed to further his purposes. I want to be a part of that. So that is the first thing. Is that true for you? Is that true for them? The second principle, live your life faithfully in the everyday, seeking to grow in the Lord. When we flip the camera back to Isaac, it says he has returned from Beer Lahai Roi. And whenever you have a name like that, especially a really long name like that, there's these search engines, and just look it up. Like, where have I seen that name before? And you've seen it in chapter 16. And it was the story of Hagar, where she was like kicked out into the desert. And Beer Lahai Roi means the well of the living one who sees me. By the way, it would be a well that saves her son in following scene. So here again, God is looking, and he is seeing someone that needs him, that needs the fulfillment of his promise. Just as he promised, gave the ram caught in the thicket, he's going to provide a wife. And Isaac isn't worrying. In fact, Isaac is out doing his quiet time. 63. Isaac went out to meditate in the field toward evening. That meaning he's praying. He is seeking the Lord. So they're living faithfully. No one's freaking out. They may have a desire. God has a purpose. They're seeking the Lord. Third principle, be intentional when possibility presents itself. So there he is. He's out meditating, and he lifts his eyes, which is a phrase that has been used in the last 2 chapters for someone looking up and seeing the provision of God, right? So here we are again. He lifts his eyes, and what does he see off in the distance? But this silhouette. It's a pleasing silhouette. The hair is blowing in the wind. And then suddenly he feels his palms get sweaty, and his toes begin to curl, and his heart begins to beat quickly.
I wanna know what love is.
It was the fall of 1993. And I was at gospel choir rehearsal. Yes, gospel choir. Come on, you can picture that. And it was in Barrows Auditorium on the campus of Wheaton College. And there was this young woman on stage playing with the choir director's 3-year-old daughter. She had a long sleeve, hot pink polo shirt, light colored jeans, and those old school buck Oxfords with the red sole. I'm wearing the red sole shoes this morning. And a friend of mine leaned over and said, "Hey, that's Becky Litvin. That's the president's daughter." And it was well-pleasing to me. But it wasn't just Isaac that had a pleasant experience, but it was also Rebekah of the text who also lifted her eyes, and she saw Isaac. And before the defender even came to a stop, she opened it, ran out, boom, 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 and the Bronco door opened. Hey, who is that hunka burning love? And the servant said, "That is your future husband, Isaac." So I am told that the first time that Rebekah of the front row saw me, I was in college group. And I was, I grew up on the West Coast, but I had found this cool sport coat at a second-hand store, and it was made of this material called seersucker. For West Coasters and Yankees, it's that puckered cotton material that a lawyer in Charleston, South Carolina would wear, right, with a bow tie. Kyle McManamy, I don't know if he's here, but he's probably wearing one right now. And she grew up in Memphis. And she was used to like the Memphian boys kind of dressing that way. So this was well-pleasing to her, I am told. And here's the thing. Rebekah of the text didn't throw herself at him. In fact, she began to blush and sweat, so she pulls the veil over. And she wanted him to take the lead. So one of the things about this scene is there was intentionality. They had looked for open doors, the doors opened, and they were intentional. And so this goes back to what I said about being prudent. Church is a wonderful context. College group is a wonderful context. Study center is a wonderful context. Go there to worship Jesus and to be discipled. But young men, maybe you will lift your eyes up from your Greek New Testament one afternoon, and you will see a silhouette in a doorway. And you will notice that she has Disciplines of a Godly Woman and the ESV Study Bible tucked under her arm. And you should go up to her and say, "Hey, baby, what is your chief end?" No, don't do that. Seriously, don't do that. But maybe you can ask her out. I'm not sure about like dating as a relational category in the scriptures, but the activity, the verb called dating, I think is underdone in Christian college circles these days. So ask her out. Be intentional when the possibility presents itself. Again, we have time to do this, but the first time Rebekah and I went one-on-one out, she wanted to talk about something. So it was this weird chain of events where the ATM would not spit out money. So she's like, "I'll just pay for it." So we went to a fancy restaurant called Denny's, and we talked about spiritual things, right? And I already respected her, and we were talking about some theological issues. So helpful time. A couple days later, I went to her and I said, "You know what? I felt bad that you had to pay for me. Let me get you back. So do you want to go out again?" So she's like, "Sure." So we went out. And as I was leaving the house and we were driving to the restaurant, I just said, "You know what? I'm not really paying you back. I just wanted to take you out." And she didn't tell me at the time, but in her brain, she was like, ding, 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 point scored, point scored, point scored. Because she was so sick of guys going, like, if I do kind of want to take you out, would you say yes? Or, like, do you like me? Check yes, check no. Like, she's like, just lead, dude. So, guys, in a godly way, in a gracious way, in this moment, show who you are. So now we started dating, and they had a real short dating relationship, which I totally believe in. But dating is the process of asking the question, God, is this my partner in the gospel? I cannot stress this more. Like, dating is not you saying, I don't want to deal with marriage, I'm not ready for marriage, but I kind of want the benefits of marriage. I want the emotional benefits, the romance, and a little bit of the sexuality. So we'll do this thing called dating. And you treat it as a frontage road that parallels the main road, but it's not going anywhere. You're just kind of getting some of the benefits of marriage. That is not what dating should be. I think God allows for dating, but dating should be a courtship ritual. It is an intentional friendship, and my friend, it is a friendship in God's eyes, and you must treat it that way. And you're asking that question, is this the one? So the servant shares with Isaac about her family and her character. He already knows that she's beautiful. And so learning about these things, he is ready to propose, and they go. And by the way, in the ancient Near East, and I would argue this is theologically true, at the point at which you become married is your wedding night. That is the moment where the deal is sealed. So they have that together. So marriage is for love, and marriage is for pleasure, but it is ultimately about God's faithfulness to continue his promises through your relationship. So there are things I have not done well, but one of the things that Rebekah and I are thankful for is we started dating to ask that big question. And so we asked important questions along the way. It was intentional. We got to know each other. Her family lived in our town, so I got to see her and her family and how she was raised. And we also had godly people around us. I think it's really important to date within godly community because they are part of the discernment. They should be telling you, this is really good. God seems to be in this. You honor the Lord through your relationship with each other. But also, and I've seen people just like go through the rumble strips when their community is like, no, this is not healthy. This is going to be a train wreck. But often the couple is very physically involved with each other, which wrecks your rationale and your reason, and you're not thinking straight. And so this is why I say, for the benefit of everybody, treat each other as friends, because it preserves as much objectivity as possible, and you can listen to the voices God has put in your life. So people are like, you know what? You make each other better for the Lord. You should keep proceeding. But then there's always usually a final test. And for me, it was the doorway called my future father-in-law. And fathers in this room, do not, in that moment, when he comes to you, just say, oh, you know what? We don't need to worry about this part. Welcome to the family. No, make him worry. Make him worry. You are a necessary doorway. By the way, none of this applies to my daughter. I will arrange that marriage in this room. I just want you to know. I'm kind of not joking. Anyway, so Rebekah and her mom go out of town, and I asked my future father-in-law, if he would like to go to dinner. So we go to an Indian restaurant because I want to curry favor with him. And we're making small talk, but we both know why we're there. So he pushes his plate forward, and he turns to the side, folds his hands, and he says, Jay, you've obviously brought me here to talk about something. And so I mumble and bumble through a couple minutes of something. I'm not quite sure. And then he looks at me, and his chin crinkles up, and his lip begins to quiver, and his eyes fill up with tears. And you know the story from the summer about her birth, right? Born premature, and she's a miracle baby and all of that. So he just said, Jay, Becky is a precious gift to Sherry and me. And it has been my honor to protect her and provide for her. And God has given me a mantle of responsibility, and that is to be her head. And you're asking me to transfer my headship to you. And you need to know how hard that is. So you need to be patient with me. But he said, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to fully give it to you. But when I do that, Sherry and I will also embrace you as one of our sons. It was like the Godfather moment with Marlon Brando. You will be one of us, you know? And dads, make him feel the weight of that moment, because that has been a massive blessing to me, to feel the weight of what I was about to do. Now, I've paid him back with 4 of his favorite grandchildren, okay? And so hopefully it's been a wonderful compliment. But he and Sherry really did take in a third son into the home. So dating is a process of asking the question, God, is this my partner in the gospel? It will not perfect your dating relationship, but man, is that a safety signal to it. And then finally, and this is so important for those of you looking to marry and who are married, marriage is ultimately a sermon of the gospel. This story is a courtship and marriage story that points to the ultimate courtship and romance, the gospel. One of the most powerful stories is in John chapter 4, where Jesus goes to a well, not in the evening, but in the midday, because he's got an appointment with a woman. Now, it's not going to be an earthly romance, but what he is doing is he's setting up the story that he is going to be in union with this woman who represents all of us in this room, who were guilty sinners that he rescued first and gave his righteousness to. He gave us the bracelets and the gold. He gave us his righteousness, and he has given us his kingdom. And he has betrothed himself to us. It's interesting, we're betrothed to him. We're not married yet. The actual marriage happens at the resurrection. And then we will celebrate the marriage supper of the Lamb. But betrothal is really important. It's not engagement. It's like the first step of marriage before you consummate the marriage. So he's not going to back out on it. It is a for sure deal, but we are betrothed now, meaning we are to long for that day. And marriage is designed to remind the world that we are to long for that day. And married couples, your marriage will be the healthiest when you have it with open hands. At the end of the day, it is not the end. It is a means to looking at the great union that we will have, to that wonderful consummation of the covenant represented by that great feast that we will have after the resurrection. So God's promise and providence and purpose in this story set the stage for Jesus. And that is the point of your marriage. And that is the point of every marriage. And some of you are struggling right now. And there's a lot to work out, I am sure. And it's going to take a while, I am sure. But one of the most powerful things the Holy Spirit can use is you saying, Lord, we give you back this marriage. We put it back on the altar for you. We have lived out of step. We have not been preaching the gospel with our marriage. But now will you give us a marriage where we die for one another, we suffer for one another, we serve one another, maybe even have the courage to read Ephesians 5:21 and following together this week, to be reminded of the beautiful design of the gospel and marriage. So, my friends, this morning, for those of you struggling in marriage or tempted to make an idol of your marriage or hungering for a spouse, key to healing and key to open hands and key to patience is longing for the one it all points to. I promise that Jesus is more jealous for the good of your marriage than you two ever could be. And if you will say, we will make you great and glorious through this marriage, he will do the work. He will send his Spirit. He will begin the healing. So this is a story of God's promise and providence and purpose. So, my friends, especially you young people in this room, date and marry and stay married for those things, by those things, and ultimately for the glory of God. So, Father, thank you for the gift of marriage. And even for those who are single in this room and may be single for the rest of their lives, remind them that they are betrothed to the most infinitely perfect bridegroom there has ever been, Jesus, the lover of our souls. And so, may we be full of gratitude for his love. Amen.